Hey guys, it's me again. This time I'm back with another discussion video. I wanted to talk about something that's like been bothering me for a while, but it's just a bunch of the problems with the exosister archetype. There's not really much that's gonna go on in this episode. It's just gonna mostly be my voice. So yeah, good podcast episode. I don't really know how long this is gonna be. I just kind of made up a list earlier of stuff that was bothering me about this archetype, and so I've seen this, in my comment section, and I wanted to just kind of explain my thoughts on it. So the first problem that I've, noticed is that Sophia and Irene, they're bricks at the very, at the best, Sophia's, a +1. But, you have to normal summon her. And, you'd much rather be, normal summoning a Stella, which means you need to open 2 cards to get a +1. It's not like you're already down 1 because you're gonna have to overlay those 2. So in the long run she's a +1, but if you get interrupted at all, she's just a neg. She's just so neg. Irene, obviously, I don't need to explain how she's a brick. Her suitcase is literally just bricks. I don't know what else could be in there. You have to go neg to draw a card, and that's you just versus Sophia where you just have to control their exosister. So yeah. Other than that, there's a lot of let's see, yeah. So there's a lot of just it's just kind of bricky cards, right? Because you don't want to see too many armament, and you don't want to see too many Vadis for reasons we'll get into later, because of the harsh restrictions on armament, and Vadis is a trap card. You also never want to see more than 1 Carpe Diem, and yeah. So, on to the next point. Vadis isn't really a strong interrupt. This kind of combos into a second point that I have, which is if your opponent does nothing, you just kind of lose. That's the biggest problem with this deck. And it's the reason that Vadis is such a problem, is that if your opponent does nothing, you lose the game, right? If they just refuse to play out of their graveyard and summon beaters, and you just don't have the ability to maintain any sort of board presence from hand traps, you're just getting owned. And that should be a really favorable matchup for you because you're this slow control based deck, but your opponent's just gonna own you because your cards are just they require your opponent to play into them, right? All of the exosisters require your opponent to play into them. And if you're activating Vadis on your own turn, you're already really far behind in the grind game, assuming your opponent has any sort of grind. Finally, this, where is Pax? Pax, Vadis, Miklas to an extent, and Caspatel, they all just get owned by Ash, right? This entire deck is constantly getting owned by Ash. A singular Ash Blossom just annihilates this deck so much. And so then you're having to play these secondary engines, right? You have to play an Alistair or an Eldritch engine, because if you're not, you're just getting owned by Ash. But the problem is that these engines also get owned by Ash. I haven't found a good secondary engine that combos with this deck and doesn't get owned by Ash. You can see I've got the Automat spell here. This also gets owned by Ash because if you don't have it, you're just getting if your opponent has an Ash, you get owned. So you're basically saying the way that I build the decks, I'm I am going to see people with Ash. They will have Ash, so I just need to play as many Ash targets as possible. That way, if I get Ashed once, I can still at least play. Yeah. And then even, besides Ash, this deck loses to so many hand traps. Valor, Ogre, Valor on Stella, you're owned. An Imperm or a Valor on either of these two, and you get owned. An Ogre on Stella kills you. An Ogre on Sophia, if you don't have an already established board presence, you're getting owned. A lot of the secondary engines, like Eldritch and stuff, also lose to other hand traps as well. So, it's just another one of those problems. D-Barrier. I don't think I need to talk about why this card is a problem. Boom. There's nothing else that can really be said. And like you don't really have many good non-link option or non-exist options, right? Because you're stuck between either like playing some sort of like link build, but then you have to cut down on exosisters in your extra deck, or you're playing like a fusion build with Alistair, which loses to Ash. So like you just lose to so many cards that it's a problem. Second of all, like if you are playing an alternative build like with invoked, your opponent could also just call fusion, and if you have a heavy invoked hand, you're owned again. Your first turn plays, especially like in the pure version of this deck, are just dog shit. I'm sorry. Like Magnifica is honestly not bad. I think like a quick play banish on your opponent's turn, plus the ability to proactively lock out graveyards stuff is really good. That being said, this card isn't doing it for me. Like this combo it's just so hard to like consistently be able to pull off. People have outs in Draco back, which is a fucking pain to deal with, right? Because you basically have to negate the Aquamancer, which means that you don't have any reason to like play this card really. Like it's why I need Defo to come out so fast, because Magnifica just makes this deck so much better. Like this guy ain't it. I'm sorry. Right? And like your first turn plays are usually like 2 negates. Like unless you're playing Utopia. But like Utopia has so many other problems, right? It's bricky, it loses to Nib. Which I will talk about later. Next, there are so many stupid restrictions on these cards. I'm like sorry, you know? Like why does Carpe Diem say that your opponent can only target them if they were special summoned from the graveyard? Like, why? You know, like, just make it so that they can't target them. You know, like, that would, like, with how awful this card is, it would unironically be fair. Armament. Why can you only activate this during your opponent's turn unless they control a monster special from the graveyard? Like, why? Right? Because they released these 2 god-awful cards, and then you just have, like, Pax and Vadis, which are, like, some of the most pushed cards I've ever fucking read. Like, it's a Rhoda and a special summon. You know, it's literally, like, Vadis, if it resolves entirely, including the exosisters, you're basically going +4, right? Because you're getting 2 bodies on board, plus, like, either a negate, a bounce, or a search, and you're getting at least 2 of those, right? So you're either like stopping your opponent, and you're getting pluses off of Caspatel and Mikolas, right? Gibrine allows you to get more damage, in case for lethal, and like Asophiel is a bounce. Like all of these cards individually are good. The Xyz are good. It's just that like these 2 cards specifically are just so god awful. Vadis, I mean, like, it's pretty good, but like I said earlier, you're not going to be able to fully resolve Vadis, like, 90% of the time. And if Vadis is your game plan, you are going to lose. Like, that's the biggest thing I learned from Exosister Eldritch. It's that, like, Vadis isn't an interrupt in itself, right? Like I was saying earlier, they will just play around it, right? Like, if your opponent plays into your game plan, you will most likely win. But if your opponent just says, okay, and plays around your game plan, you are just going to lose. And like if you have no way to force interaction, then you're just getting owned, right? Battle phase. I mean, there's nothing I really want to say about this, but like basically these 4 monsters are shitty summon breaker, right? Like if the turn player can right, basically how Summon Breaker works, you can see right here. If they conduct their 3rd summon of a monster this turn, it becomes the end phase. During main phase 1 only. They just go battle phase, and then main phase 2 before conducting their 3rd summon. Now, what you'll notice is that, not in the same way, but these cards basically read the same, right? Because if they do really need to play out of their graveyard, and you flip Vadis hoping that they'll like, you know, like banish like the Aquamancer, your opponent can just like summon 2 900 attack monsters and beat over these. Or they could summon a single 900 attack monster and basically say, what do you want? You want to lock me out of the graveyard, or like get an interruption in like the more traditional sense. And like that's just problematic because like the biggest weakness of this deck, like if these things were tanks, you know, if they had like 1800 defense, I think this deck would unironically be really good because you have the ability to like basically say you have to like pass your turn. As of now, they can just go, okay, battle phase, right? Like, it's just another way to play around the graveyard lock, which your opponent doesn't need. The in-game progression and like how you win the game in this deck is really fucking weird, because like you're not like right, like Selene is here because I want to talk about like Selene into access code lines, right? It loses to a lot of like it's good for finishing, but like when are you going to have 4 monsters on the board, or like when are you going to be able to get 3 monsters on the board for that matter, right? Because let's say you have like at 2 of the exosisters, you link into Lina into Selene, and then Selene into access code, right? That requires your opponent to have a spellcaster grave and no interruptions. And you have to be able to get 2 monsters on board, like, turn 2. And, like, you're not going to be OTKing with this deck, so you're basically trading access code for whatever your opponent has. Which, like, I just don't think it's worth it. And, like, if you're doing access code, like, post turn 2 or 3, how are you getting there? Because, getting into my next point, the deck just kind of lacks follow-up, right? Because, like, you get a search off of Mikalace, and you get a search off of Caspatel, and that's it. So if you don't, like, get both of these searches, or, like, if you're Vadis, like, they just ignore it, you know, and they just say, okay, I'll pass, kill me. You know, if you pass on, like, Mikalace, Vadis, and 2 hand traps, which is a normal board, what are you doing, you know? You don't have the ability to kill your opponent. And, like, you just lack that follow-up because, like, you're searching another spell. You know, maybe you search a pack, special monster, but you don't have the ability to kill like other decks do. And that's a problem. I think Magnifica helps this, obviously. Being able to attack twice is obviously really good, but like, we live in a pre-Magnifica world. She does not exist yet. So I've got to deal without her, you know? And then finally, the worst fucking problem about this deck is that if you're playing literally anything that isn't the Eldritch variant, you have no way to play around Nib. Like, I don't know, I've been like thinking through, trying to like think of how a Brave sort of Exosister build could work in theory. I got nothing, I'm sorry. This deck just dreadfully needs like an Omni, but it also dreadfully needs its normal summon. Right, like, the only way that you're getting Sophia out and getting the +1 is if you normal summon her or normal summon Stella and special her. So basically you're trading Sophia for, like, the Brave engine, which, like, I'm not sure if it's worth it, honestly, because, like, with how big the Brave engine is and, like, how pricey it is, I don't think it's worth it to buy, at least right now. And so, like, there's not really much incentive for me to invest time into labbing it. So it's just one of those things. Plus, like, usually how you would do it in traditional Xyz decks is you go into Utopic Draco Future early. But you can't. Because you have to go, like, you know, you'd have to overlay 2 into Caspatel summon Ellis, and then, like, pack summon, like, another Exosister. And then that's already 4, well, no, that's 5 without making Mikalace. So the moment you make Mikalace, that's 6, they just nib you there, and you're owned. Like, yeah. That's really it. Like, these are just a bunch of problems that I've been running into, because I've been trying to scrounge good replays. And, like, 90% of the time, it's just me, like, being like, well, you know, I have the opportunity. Like, maybe I just, because, like, this could be a me thing, you know, maybe I just need to go Mikalace pass. But, like, when I see the opportunity to make a UDF, I think that's generally worth it. especially like turn 2 or 3. And so maybe it's a thing where I just need to go like Celine, but like Celine still loses to Nib is the problem. So like there's really no way to play around Nib here, and like that's just my biggest problem in this deck. Invoked obviously helps, but like if you can get your invoked engine up, you're already winning. Yeah, so that's really I just wanted to talk about the decks, get some stuff off my chest because like I really do like this deck and I think it has major potential. It's just like it struggles with the stupidest things because of how this archetype was designed, right? Like Armament is one of the most pushed cards you've read if you ignore these last like lines of text. And like it's still okay with these lines of text, but like just like, get rid of this part right here. And like suddenly the card's actually good. Plus, like, you're never gonna see this anywhere else outside of Exosisters. Like, why do you care? Like, they can't target you with monsters, but like, that really only. That's another thing I forgot to mention. Carpe Diem. You can't target us with monster effects, but like, that only helps these two. Like, it doesn't help Gibrine because like, these are immune to destruction. Like, when's a monster effect banish that's special summoned from the graveyard? Like, I can't think of one, Like, oh, they're going to use Monster Reborn on Shureg. Oh no, like whatever. I don't know. This was just some of my thoughts. I wanted to like kind of make a discussion video, get some more people talking. It's just a very like frustrating issue to say the least. This deck could really use some more support. I hope it gets it really badly. Yeah. That's about it. Have a great day, guys.